Hello and thank you for watching. This is STSC back again with LEGO Transformers Rise of the Beasts Mirage. From what we've seen in the trailers, it definitely seems like Mirage will be taking over the role of Kid Appeal character from Bumblebee this time around. That, combined with the fact that his robot mode is Age of Extinction level impossible with how little car you can see, got me really interested in trying to build him. After Optimus and Scourge, it was fun to build another Movieverse Carbot again. I haven't really built one since I think Sideways? I think he was the last one I did. So it was definitely fun going back to this scale, especially since the last few cars I did were 3 wide. So it was kind of interesting going back to having to build these more complex characters. I think I really nailed the broad strokes of the alternate mode. It's not a perfect version of a Porsche, but I think it definitely looks like one, and it has all the major details. I really love the way the headlights look here with the sloping hood. The hood here is entirely blue. There really should be a thinner blue stripe on there, but I just couldn't get a thinner stripe than this. There's also the blue stripes on the side here, which should go the entire distance of the car, really, and they should be a little bit higher, but again, just couldn't fit that in at this scale. Things maybe fall apart a little on the back. You can see there's these grills here which look a little out of place. There's no blue stripe on the spoiler, and there's these orange bits poking through on the sides of the windows. But all of those little inaccuracies I don't think are enough to weigh down what I think is a pretty cute little Porsche mode. I don't usually do this, but when I finished designing Mirage, he had a pretty open space on the bottom of the car, so I was able to actually add some weapon storage. You can see this is his gun arm here, and it simply pops out, and you can see there's a lot of empty space here, which is why I added some weapon storage. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure, and here we have Optimus Prime. That's all there is to say about Mirage and his car mode, so now it's time to transform. And here we have Mirage in his robot mode. Like I said earlier, this design is kind of Age of Extinctions levels of impossible. There's so few car parts you can see on him, and he really changes visually between his car mode and his robot mode. So going into building this guy, I knew I wasn't going to get every detail right. So I picked a detail to focus on and went from there. Specifically, I chose to prioritize having the headlights end up on his shoulders like they're meant to be. There were kind of two main details I could choose. Those are the lights on his chest or the lights on his shoulders. And I knew that trying to have the lights kind of shrink down to form a properly proportioned chest would be really tricky, so I went with the shoulder lights. Of course, that does mean that his chest lights are actually fake. They aren't the real lights from the front of the car. In fact, I don't actually have those lights represented on the front of the car in this build. But again, I think that this is for the better and makes for a much nicer Transformer overall. Taking a closer look at the torso, I actually really enjoy how the slopes here on his chest look. Those were the roof in car mode, and here they form the faux front of the car. I think it looks really nice. I've also used this very new piece from the most recent wave of Speed Champions here, and it actually gives him the little circular detail on his midsection, which is meant to be kind of part of the engine. I made this clip here blue on a whim because I realized there really should be more blue on his chest. I think the blue is kind of higher, closer up with the lights, but I think this effectively captures that little bit of color. Like I said earlier, I prioritized getting the headlights up here on the shoulder, and it does result in a pretty bulky shoulder section here and a bit of kibble on the back, but I think it was worth it just to get that detail. The wheels here are on the back of the arms. They really should be on the shoulders up here, but I think they're close enough to where they're meant to be. Taking a closer look at the legs, I've used a black 1x1 tile to represent the grills on his thighs. I actually did have grill tiles like these here originally, but they were only mounted by one stud and came off so easily that I ended up ditching them because I just really didn't like how they would constantly fall off. But speaking of grill tiles, I actually really enjoy how they look here on his feet. They sit flush with the toe, and I think it captures kind of the weird feet design he has. And turning him around, there is a bit of an inaccuracy here. The wheels are meant to be mounted on the backs of his ankles, however, they're not oriented right. They really should be rotated 90 degrees, kind of like this, but I just wasn't able to fit that kind of hinge in here, and I think that this is good enough. I actually kind of like how they function as kind of rubber heels, too. I mentioned earlier that the transformation to get the headlight shoulders resulted in a pretty big, chunky backpack section on the shoulders, and yeah, it is a fair bit of kibble. But honestly, with this design, I think kibble is kind of impossible to avoid. I've built one accessory for Mirage, and it's his cannon arm. You've already seen how it can store in car mode, but it can actually peg back onto the same bar in robot mode to store on his back. However, when he wants to use it, it simply swaps out for his forearm with a stud connection. And once it's on there, I think it looks pretty cool. For articulation, Mirage has an outward shoulder joint as well as a forward joint. This is kind of both a shoulder and an elbow. It's kind of too low to be a shoulder, too high to be an elbow, so that is a bit awkward, but it is a way to have his arm swing forward. Then at the waist, there actually is a tiny bit of a swivel just due to how it connects, but the spoiler moves with it, and because that's 4 wide, it can kind of get in the way. But there is just that tiny bit of swivel, which could be a little bit useful when posing him. Then at the hips, there is an outward joint as well as forward and backward. There's also a swivel, which I think is actually really key to getting his stance to look natural, and that's another reason why I ditched the grills here, because when I had grills, it was kind of impossible to swivel the leg. Then there is kind of a knee or ankle joint, depending on how you look at it, here, which is actually the transformation joint as well, and a swivel. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure, and here we have Optimus Prime. While I was building Mirage, I didn't have Optimus out to compare him against, so I was honestly a little bit worried I was making him too big. But obviously those fears were completely irrational because he's pretty tiny here. I'm honestly not sure if this is actually accurate. This is how the original movie Prime would scale with most Carbots, but from the Bumblebee movie, it seems like he's a lot smaller compared to his soldiers, so honestly I have no clue. We haven't really seen a direct comparison between him and any of his Carbots, so I'm just going to hope that this is accurate, because personally I'm happy with this scale. From the second we saw Mirage in his robot mode, I knew that this design was going to be a fun challenge, and I'm pretty happy with what I was able to come up with. Sure, it's not perfectly accurate, but I think I got about as close as I could, and I'm pretty happy with what I came up with. But that's all I have to say about him, so I'll see you next time.